Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a modern ruffle top. For this small wonder, we went with a stitch combo that we love, a bottom border that offers some shape, and a star stitch v-neck that's sure to catch the eye. Speaking of, if you're looking to make more things that catch the eye, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of modern crochet designs and patterns sure to catch eyes and drop jaws with new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 3 yarn will work, but I used a total of 175 grams of yarn, and that's 450 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 4mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us when you ask for a drink, do you call it soda or pop? As for me, I have always been a soda gal. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 5 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, and star stitch. This tutorial is made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 3 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 4mm hook and start off by making a chain the height that we'd like our bottom band to be. So I'd like for mine to be just about 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 22. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do a slip stitch row. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And now into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. So bring your hook down and into that chain. When we have 2 loops on our hook, we're going to gently yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. And that is our first slip stitch. Let's do this again. Into that following chain, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through everything, and again, into that following chain, insert your hook, and pull through everything. Continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row can be a little bit too tight to work into. We are now at the end of our row 1. Now our following rows after this are going to be back loop slip stitch rows. So at the end of every row, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and now put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So we're all going to start by finding that first stitch from our previous row and insert in through that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do that again. Into that following stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and that's it. We're going to continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch to reach the end of the row. When we do, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then repeat, so 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. And from there, we're just going to continue to do our back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases until this portion that we have can stretch, and making sure that we are stretching it as if we're wearing it, from mid underarm over to mid collarbone. And then I'll meet you back right after an odd number row so we can get started on the point of our bottom band. Alright, so I am back with the first portion of my bottom band. I have a total of 19 rows, and that's just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters unstretched. And now we're going to get started on the point portion of our bottom band. But right before we do that, we're going to want to insert our stitch marker into the last stitch that we have for this portion of our bottom band. So just into that top loop of that last row, insert your hook just so we know where the point is going to start. So now we're going to chain 2 because now we're going to need to do some increases. And now that we have our chain 2, let's flip our work. And now we're going to do more back loop slip stitches, starting with the second chain from our hook. So we're going to bring our hook down, skip that first chain that we have that's nearest to our hook, that's basically going to be our turning chain, and into that following chain, insert again in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook gently, and that counts as our first slip stitch for this row. Again, into that following stitch's back loop, insert, gently, pull through everything. And that's it for this row. Continue with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and then work our way all the way back up. I'll meet you back at the end of our following row, just to remind you how we're going to do our increase once more. So I am back, and we have just finished up our 1, 2, 3, third row for the increase portion of our bottom band, and now we're going to get started on the following row. So since we're along the top, all we're going to do is chain 2, there's 1, there's 2, and flip our work. And just like how we did our previous increase row, we are going to skip that chain that's nearest to our hook, and into that second chain, insert into that back loop, insert with a back loop slip stitch, and just make your way all the way down with one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and just continue to repeat these 2 rows until this portion can now stretch from mid underarm over to mid chest. And I'll meet you back when we have a total of an odd number, and then we can do our middle row and then mirror the bottom band that we have on the other side. Alright, I am back with the increase portion of my bottom band. I have a total of 35 rows, and this is now 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters unstretched. Now from here we're going to do a middle row, and that's just going to be another slip stitch row, but now without any increases or decreases. So since we all should have ended along the top, let's all chain 1, flip our work, and just put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch to reach the end of the row. Alright, so I'm back, and I have just finished up my middle row. Right before we get started, on the other side of our bottom band, we just want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into the top stitch of our middle row, so we know where that's at when we start working on the top portion of our piece. So from here, getting started on the other side of our bottom band, we're actually going to be mirroring the first half that we did for our bottom band on the other side. So all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches so we can do a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches together. So we've made our way all the way up with our back loop slip stitches, and we left the last 2, so now we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that second to last back loop. We're going to insert, pull through, and then into that last stitch's back loop, insert, and once we have those 3 loops on our hook, just yarn over, pull through all 3, and that is our decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. And now, since we only did an increase into every other row along this side, we're going to be doing a decrease into every other row on this side. So we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and make our way all the way down, putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, making our way all the way down, leaving the last 2 just so we can decrease together once more. We are back. We've made our way all the way down with our back loop slip stitch row, and then made our way all the way back up, leaving the last 2 stitches so that we can decrease together once more. So just like the last time we decreased, we're going to insert our hook into that second to last back loop, insert, pull through, into that last back loop, insert, and when we have those 3 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3, and since we're at the end of our row, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and make our way down, putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have the same amount of rows as the increased portion of our bottom band, and then I'll meet you back to finish up the width. I am back, and the decreased portion of my bottom band is finished. I have a total of 52 rows, and that's just about 6.5 inches or 15 centimeters unstretched. And now we're going to finish off our front panel's bottom band with more back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of row as the first portion of our bottom band. So from where we're at, chain 1, flip our work, put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And I'll just meet you back at the end of this following row so we can insert our stitch marker into the top of that row to match this row over here. Alright, so I made my way all the way up with my back loop slip stitch row. Remember, this row didn't have any increases or decreases. I just wanted to meet you back to make sure that we all inserted our stitch marker into the top of this row. And now from here, just continue to do our back loop slip stitch rows until we have the same amount of rows as this first portion right over here. So for me, that's going to be a total of 19 rows just for this section. Once we have that, we should all end along the top, and once we do, I'll meet you back so that we can single crochet along the top edge of our bottom band. So I am back. The entirety of the front portion of my bottom band is all finished up. I have a total of 71 rows, and my width is 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to single crochet along the top of our bottom band. So since we all should have ended along the top, what we're going to do is chain 1. And working into every side row, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So we're going to start by finding our first side row, and this is mine right here. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Let's do that again. This raised row is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop and single crochet. Let's do that again. This is my following side row. I'm going to insert into that top loop with a single. This is my following side row. Insert into that top loop with a single. And we're going to continue to put 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way up until we reach our middle stitch marker stitch. But once we reach this first stitch marker, we want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into that same stitch because we still would like to know where the stitch is. So I've made my way all the way up and I have reached my middle row, and that has my stitch marker into it. All we're going to do into the top of that row is do an increase of 3 single crochets and then insert our stitch marker into that middle stitch so we know right where the point is. So this raised row is my middle row. All I'm going to do is find that top loop. I'm going to insert my hook in through there if I can with 3 single crochets. So here is my first, into that same middle stitch with my second, and then into that same middle stitch with my third single crochet, and I will be inserting my stitch marker into that second stitch that we made into that increase of 3 so we know where that middle stitch is. And then from here we're going to continue to put 1 single crochet into every side row, inserting my stitch marker into this stitch once we reach it until we reach the end of our piece. Then we're going to do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I'm back and I've just finished up my single crochet along the top of my bottom band. Now right before we get started with the height of our front panel, we're going to need to insert 2 stitch markers the width that we'd like for our front band to be. So I've inserted my stitch marker into the 8th stitch from the top, and that is not including our middle stitch marker stitch. So just to count my knot together, here it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and I inserted my stitch marker, and I repeated the same thing on the other side, remembering we are not counting this stitch marker stitch, and the amount of stitches that we have needs to be an even number of stitches along both sides. And once we have that, we can get started on the height. So let's all start by inserting our hook into our stitch marker stitch along the top. Alright, so we are back and are ready to get started on our front band. So we're all going to want to make sure that our single crochet row, the right side, is faced up towards us, and then we're going to be inserting our hook into the top corner stitch that we have for the middle row. Now from here, we're going to be working along the left side from the middle stitch over to our front band stitch marker stitch that we just inserted, but when we wear it, it's going to be along the right side because the single crochet row is the front. So what we're going to do from here is insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and we're all going to start by making an even number chain that reaches all the way up to the top of our shoulder. Now I need a total of 10 inches or 25 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 46. Alright, so now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row, which is going to be our star stitch row. So we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And now to get started on our star stitch, we're going to need to pull up 6 loops from our chain. So we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that second chain from our hook, or into that chain that we blocked off. We're going to insert, yarn over, and pull up a loop for 2 loops on our hook. Like I said, we like for a total of 6 loops. So into that following chain, again, insert, pull up a loop for 3, into that following chain, insert, pull up a loop for 4, 2 more times into that following chain, pull through for 5, and then into that following chain, we're going to insert, pull up a loop for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 loops on our hook. And from here, we're going to yarn over, pull through all 6 of those loops. And now that we have this, to close off our star stitch, we're going to chain 1. And that is the end of our first star stitch for our first row. Now let's get started on our second star stitch. So we need to pull up 6 loops again, but it's not going to be done exactly like the first one. What we're going to do is insert our hook into that chain 1 space that we made from our previous star stitch. Now that chain 1 space actually counts as the eye of our star stitch. So what we're going to do is insert our hook into the eye of that star stitch, pull up a loop. We're then going to find the last stitch from our previous star stitch, and in between that last one and that following stitch, we're going to insert our hook in between and pull up another loop. So this is my first peg, this is my second. I'm going to insert my hook in between and pull through for 3 loops on our hook. And then we're going to insert our hook into that last stitch that our previous star stitch was worked into. So this is mine right here. It is occupied. So into that same chain, insert, pull through. We should all have 4 loops on our hook. And then we're going to pull up a loop into each of the following 2 stitches for a total of 6 loops. So into that following chain, insert, pull through. And then into that following chain, insert, pull through, for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 6, and then chain 1 to secure. And from here, it's going to be a repeat of the second star stitch all the way till we reach the end of the row. So let's do this again. Into the eye of our previous star stitch, insert into that stitch, pull through, into that last peg from our previous star stitch, we're going to insert our hook in through there, pull through, and then into that last stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into, insert, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, and then we're going to pull up a loop into the following 2 stitches as well. So into that next, pull through, and into the one right after that, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1 to form the eye of our star stitch and to secure it off. Let's just do one more a little bit quicker. Again, into the eye of our previous star stitch, pull through, in between the last and second to last peg from our previous star stitch, we're going to insert, pull through, into that last stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into, pull through, and then pull up a loop into the following 2 stitches as well. There's one, there is my second, and we should have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. From here, yarn over and pull through all 6 of those loops and chain 1 to form the eye of our star stitch and to finish off the star stitch set. We're going to continue to do this until we have 2 stitches left, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so we've made our way all the way down with our star stitch, and we're about to do our last one. We should all have 2 chains left, so what we're going to do is start off our star stitch the same way that we started all of our other star stitches. So we're going to insert our hook into the eye of our previous star stitch, pull through, in between the last and second to last peg from our previous star stitch, pull through, and then into that last stitch that our previous star stitch was worked into, pull through. And we still need a total of 6 loops on our hook, so into that second to last stitch, we're going to insert, pull through, and then into that last stitch, insert, pull through. We should have 6 loops on our hook, so we're going to yarn over and pull through all 6 loops, chain 1 to secure, and to close off our row, we're going to do a half double crochet into that same last stitch. So yarn over, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3 of our loops. And that is how we're going to close off the end of our star stitch row. Now we're going to need to connect it into the base. So we just want to make sure, because the star stitch is not reversible, that our single crochet along our bottom band is still faced up and we're working towards the left of our middle stitch. And now we're going to connect it into that following stitch. So since we're currently worked into that middle stitch marker stitch, we're going to find that following stitch, which this one is mine right here. We're going to insert our hook in through there with a slip stitch. And that slip stitch is just to connect it. It doesn't count as a stitch. And now our row 1 is connected. Getting started on our row 2, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base and flip our work. And now that our work is flipped, we're going to single crochet all the way down. So how we're going to do that is start with 1 single crochet into the top of the half double crochet that we did from our previous row. So making sure that we're not looking into any of those slip stitches, we're going to find the top of that half double crochet, which this is mine right here. I'm going to insert with just 1 single crochet. Then we're going to find the eye of our previous star stitch and insert with just 1 single crochet into there. So this is the eye. You guys can tell because it is a pretty noticeable circle. Find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. Now that we have the first 2 single crochets for this row, we're now going to be putting 2 single crochets into the eye of all of the rest of our star stitches, making our way all the way down. So finding that following eye from our next star stitch from the previous row, we're now going to insert with 2 singles. So here is 1, and then into that same eye with 2 single crochets. Let's do that again. This is my following eye. Insert your hook into there with 2 single crochets again. So there is 1, and there is 2. And that's it. Continue with 2 single crochets into the eye of every star stitch until we're worked into the last eye of our last star stitch. Alright, so we've made our way all the way down with our single crochet row. We just did our last 2 single crochets into the last eye of our star stitch from our previous row. And now we're going to single crochet into the last stitch. So this is the last eye that I have from my previous star stitch row, and we should all have this extra stitch right next to it. So single crochet into that stitch just once. Now we should all have an odd number of stitches for the single crochet row, but since we're working on a slant like this, we're going to need to end this row with an increase so we can keep up with the slant. So right after that single crochet, we're going to half double and double crochet into that same last stitch, because if we just do 3 single crochets, then it's actually going to start to curve on us. So now we're going to yarn over and insert our hook into that same last stitch with a half double crochet, and then into that same stitch with a double crochet. So yarn over, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and now our row 2 is finished. Now let's get started on our row 3, which is going to be another star stitch row. So let's all chain 2 and flip our work. So now that our work is flipped, we're going to get started on our first star stitch, and it's now going to start off this way for every row. So what we're going to do is take a look at that second chain from our hook, and we're going to pull up 2 loops from that one chain. One is going to be through the back loop, and the second is going to be through the front loop. So let's get that started. Let's take a look at that second chain from our hook. We're going to find our back loop. This is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook into that back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop for 2 loops on our hook. We're now going to do the same thing into that same chain, but now into that front loop. So this is my front loop right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through there, pull up a loop for 3 loops on our hook. And we still need to pull up a total of 6 loops. So into that following stitch from our previous row, pull through, and into the stitch right after that, pull through, and then into the stitch right after that, pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 to secure. And now our following trinity stitch to reach the end of the row is going to be the same as the second trinity stitch that we did from our row 1. So just to do it again really quickly, insert your hook into the eye of our previous star stitch, pull through, in between the last and second to last post from our previous star stitch, pull through, into that last stitch that our previous star stitch was worked into, pull through, and then into the following 2 stitches as well. So into the next, pull up a loop, into the one after that, pull up a loop for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. From here, we're going to yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1 to secure. And continue on with this star stitch till we reach the end of the row, making sure that the last star stitch is worked the same way that we did the last star stitch from our row 1, and making sure that it ends on a half double crochet. So we made our way all the way down with our star stitch. Our last one was closed off with just a half double crochet into that same last stitch, just like how our last one from our row 1 was ended. Now we're going to connect it into the base, and it's going to be done exactly the same way. So we're all going to start by finding that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch into there to close off our star stitch row, and then to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that next available stitch and flip our work. And just to get started on this single crochet row, we're going to single crochet once into the top of the half double crochet from our previous row. So into there with 1 single, into the following eye of our previous star stitch with 1 single, and then into all the eyes after this, 2 single crochets. So just as an example, this is my following eye. There is 1 and 2 singles, and continue this until we put 2 single crochets into every eye until we reach the last one. We've made our way all the way down with our single crochet row, and now we're going to close it off with our increase, which is going to be single, half double, double into that last stitch. So we just worked into the last eye, and we should have this last stitch right over here. So into there, insert with a single, a half double, and then a double crochet, and now our single crochet or our row 4 is finished. Let's just get started on our row 5, and then I'll let you do the rest on your own. So chain 2 to get started on our following star stitch row and flip our work. Now doing this really quickly, we're going to find that second chain from our hook and pull up a loop by inserting our hook into that back loop, pull through for 2 loops, next into that same chain's front loop, pull up a loop for 3 loops into the following stitch, pull up a loop, stitch after that, pull up a loop and into the stitch right after that, pull up a loop for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 6, chain 1 to secure, and then we're going to do the rest of our star stitches, making our way all the way down, making sure that the last star stitch always ends on a half double crochet. Then our single crochet row that ends with our increases, and we're going to continue to repeat those 2 rows until we reach our next stitch marker stitch that we inserted into for the width that we'd like for our front band to be. Once we do, I will meet you back. Alright, so I am back. I have just finished up the front band for one of my front bands, and now we're actually going to do the other side. But the star stitch detail that we have is not reversible, so instead of inserting our hook into that middle stitch and then repeating, we're actually going to need to start into the stitch marker stitch that we inserted into for the outside of our front band and then work our way in. So what we're first going to need to do is count out the amount of stitches that we have for our last row that we have. It should be a single crochet row for everyone, and it is going to end on an odd number. Now I know that when we got started with our star stitch, we made an even number chain, but because we want the rest of the body portion of our front panel to be pretty much the same, we're going to make a chain of this same odd number of stitches. So from here, right after I insert my hook into this outer stitch that I have for my front band, I'm now going to make a chain of 53. So now that we have made our chain, we're now going to do our star stitch, making our way all the way back down. So since we're along the edge right here, just to get started on the first one, we're going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And we're going to insert our hook into that second chain from our hook, pull through into the chain after that one, pull through, chain after that, because remember we want a total of 6 loops on our hook, pull through, we have 4, so let's do 2 more, into that following, pull through, and then into the one right after that, insert, and pull through for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. So yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1. And for this row, we're going to continue to do our star stitch, making our way all the way down. But remember, since we made an odd number chain, I will meet you back when we have just 1 chain left. So I've made my way all the way down with my star stitch. I just have 1 stitch left. And now we're going to do our last star stitch for this row. Now what we're going to do is start it off the same way, but instead of pulling up 6 loops, we're only going to pull up 5 loops. So we're going to insert our hook into the eye of our previous star stitch, in between our last 2 posts, pull through into that last stitch that our previous star stitch is worked into, pull through, and then into that last stitch that we have, pull through. We should all have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, and all we're going to do is yarn over, pull through all 5, chain 1, and since this is the last star stitch, insert with a half double crochet. And just to double check, because we don't want any of our sets to be more or less than the opposite side, we're going to count the amount of sets that we have for this row, and then count the amount of sets that we have for our last star stitch row on the other side, and they should match up. Now I have a total of 25 on this side, and for my last star stitch row over here, I had 25. So what we're going to do from here is connect it into the base, making sure that we're connecting it, working our way up towards the middle, and we're going to slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, so the same as the other side, to connect our row 1. And then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch, to work our way up to our row 2, flip our work, and we're now going to single crochet the same way that we single crocheted our single crochet row on this side, but leaving the last eye of our star stitch because we're going to have to decrease. Alright, so I've made my way all the way up with my single crochet row. I have left the last eye for my last star stitch and that last stitch. So what we're going to do from here, because we did an increase on the other side, and since we're working in the opposite direction from the other side, we're going to need to end this row with a decrease. So all we're going to do is yarn over, preparing for a half double crochet. Then we're going to insert our hook into the last eye from the last star stitch, pull through, and then into that last stitch, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 4 loops. Now our single crochet row, or our row 2, is finished. And now from here, it's going to be a repeat of these 2 rows until we reach our middle stitch marker stitch. So just as a refresher, to do our first star stitch, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, and we're all going to start by pulling up 6 loops, remembering that the first 2 loops for the first star stitch of every row is going to be pulled into that second chain from our hook, in through the back loop, and then in through the front loop. Do our star stitch all the way down, which we should end with 2 stitches left instead of the 1 from our previous row. Slip stitch it into the base, and then single crochet back up, ending the row with a decrease of 2 half double crochets. Continue this until we reach the middle stitch marker stitch, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back. So I am back, and I have just finished up the second front band, and now we're going to do the rest of our front panel. So I'm going to insert my hook into the top corner stitch of the first front band that we did, because I did not do a chain up of 1 and cut, and now we're going to do our row sequence, which is going to be 2 moss stitch rows and a single crochet. So from here, we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. So that first chain is going to count as a turning chain, that second chain is going to count as a chain, and from here we're going to skip that first stitch and into the following, insert with a single crochet. And that should form our first chain space for this row. It's kind of hard to see, but if you pull it apart, you can see it right there. Let's do this again. We're going to chain 1, skip the following stitch into the next, insert with a single, that forms our second chain space for this row. Let's do this once more. Chain 1, skip a stitch, and into the following single crochet. Now all together we should have 1, 2, 3 chain spaces. We're going to continue this until we have 1 stitch left. We've made our way all the way down. We should all have 1 stitch left, and to keep up with our moss stitch chain spaces that we have, all we're going to do is chain 1, skip that last stitch, and then we're going to slip stitch it into the base. So I'm actually going to take out my stitch marker from my front band because I don't need this anymore. And all I'm going to do after we did our chain 1 is find that following stitch into the base and slip stitch it into there. So we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we connected our front band. And now from here, that is our chain space, and we're going to work our way up to our following moss stitch row. So slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base and flip our work. None of those slip stitches count as a stitch. And for our moss stitch rows, each of our single crochets is going to be worked into our previous row's chain space. So since that first stitch that we have is a chain space, we're going to automatically insert our hook in through there with a single crochet. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, which is a single crochet from our previous row, and into that following stitch, which is our chain space, single crochet. Let's do this again. Chain 1, skip a stitch, into that following stitch, which is our chain space, single crochet, and we're going to continue doing this to reach the end of the row. We made our way down to the end of our second moss stitch row, and now our following row is going to be a single crochet row. But we are still going to keep up with the increases that we need to do until we reach our following stitch marker within the base. So since we're worked into that last chain space to get started on our single crochet row, since we're along the top, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now our increase is going to be a double, half double, single into that same first stitch. So yarn over, preparing for a double. Into that first stitch, insert with a double crochet, into that same stitch with a half double, and then into that same stitch with a single crochet, and that is our increase of 3 for this row. And now we're going to continue with our single crochet row. So put 1 single crochet into every stitch and chain space and connect it into the base the same way that we just did. So our first 1, 2, 3 rows are all finished. Now it's going to be a repeat of these 3 rows until we reach our stitch marker down here. Now this is a 3-row repeat, but since it is an odd number, our following stitch, which should be our moss stitch, is actually going to start at the base, whereas the first moss stitch row that we did started along the top. So let's just get started with this moss stitch row. We should have already connected our single crochet row into the base. So now we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base to work our way up to the following row and flip our work. Now, as a quick tip, whenever we are along the base working on our moss stitch row and we're working our way out, we're going to start with a single crochet into that first available stitch. And then now we're going to do our chain spaces. So chain 1, skip a stitch into the next, single crochet. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch into the next, single crochet. And we're going to continue this to reach the end of the row. So I made my way all the way down with my row 4, which should be my first moss stitch row for this 3-row repeat. Now we're going to get started on our second moss stitch row, so we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. Now whenever we're along the outside edge, working our way down towards the end, working on a moss stitch row, we're going to chain 2, skip that first stitch, which in this case, since our previous row was a moss stitch row, is a single crochet, and then into that following stitch is our chain space. So we're going to skip that first stitch, and then into that following stitch, which is a chain space, single crochet, and that is our first chain space for this row. Let's do this again. Chain 1, skip a stitch, which is a single crochet, and into the following, single crochet. Chain 1, skip a stitch, and single. Continue this until we have 1 stitch left. So our row 5 for the side panel is nearly finished. We have made our way all the way down with our second moss stitch row, and we have left that last stitch. Now what we're going to do from here, since we do still need to keep up with our chain spaces, we are going to chain 1, skip that last stitch, which should have been the first single crochet from our previous row, and slip stitch into the base, just like that. And from here, just to finish up our 3-row repeat, it's going to be a single crochet row, so slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, and flip our work. And now we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. So just do the first one, find the last stitch from our previous row, which is our chain space, insert with a single, into that next stitch with a single. I'll meet you back when we have 1 stitch left. And now that I made my way all the way down with my row 6, we left our last stitch, which should be a chain space. We're now going to do our increase, which is now, since we're working from the base, working our way out, is going to be a single half double double. So into that stitch, insert with a single, same last stitch with a half double, same last stitch with a double. And we have just finished up our second set of our 3-row repeat, and now we're just going to repeat. So since this is a single crochet row, we're going to get started on our moss stitch row. So chain 2, flip our work, and then do our moss stitch all the way down. And we're going to continue with our 2 moss stitch rows and single crochet row, making sure that the outer edge of our single crochet row has an increase of 3. We're going to continue this until we reach our stitch marker along the bottom. Alright, so we are back and we have made our way all the way down with our 3-row repeat until we have reached our stitch marker. Now what we're going to do from here is our same 3-row repeat, but now without the increases along the top until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. So same rules apply for our moss stitch. When we're along the base working our way out, we're going to start that row off with a single crochet, and then when we're along the outside working our way in with our moss stitch, we're always going to end off the row with a chain 1 and then slip stitch into the base. And slip stitching it into the base is going to be done exactly the same way that it's been done this entire time. So go ahead and continue with our 3-row repeat until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and then I'll meet you back just to remind you where we're going to insert our hook so we can do the same thing on the other side. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished up one side of my front panel, and now we're going to do the same thing that we just did here on the other side. So start by inserting your hook into the top corner stitch of our other detail right where our star stitch is, and then we're going to continue on with our 2 moss stitch rows and single crochet row, making sure that we have an increase along the outer edge until we reach our stitch marker down here. And then right after that, just continue on with our moss stitch and single crochet row until we don't have any more stitches left. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back again. Alright, so we are back and the entirety of our front panel is all finished. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut once when I was finished up with the second half, and now all we're going to do is single crochet across the top, and then we'll be completely done with the front panel. So all we're going to do is insert our hook into the top corner stitch of our front panel. And now we're just going to single crochet across, putting 1 single crochet into every side row until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. We are going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And all we're going to do is find our first side row, and this is mine right here. I'm going to insert into that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Again, this is my following side row. I'm going to insert into there with another single crochet. And that's it. We're just going to continue to put 1 single crochet into every side row, including into the top of our star stitch rows as well, and just continue this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So I am back and our single crochet row along the tops of our front panel is all finished. And now we can get started on the back. So we're going to get started with our bottom band, and it's going to start off the same way that our front band did. So we're all going to start by making the same chain that we made, getting started with our front panel. So for me, I made a chain 22. And then from there, just continue on with back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases until we have the same amount of rows as our front panel. So for me, I had a total of 71 rows. So for my back panel, I will have a total of 71 rows as well. When we have that finished, do not do a chain up of 1 and cut, because we can single crochet across the top and work straight into the back panel from there. So I am back and the bottom band is all finished. I have my total of 71 rows, and now we're just going to single crochet across the top. So right after our last row, we're all going to chain 1. And all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row. So start by finding that first side row and insert with a single crochet. Find our following side row, find that top loop, and insert with another single crochet, and that's it. Continue with 1 single crochet into every side row. Alright, so we are back and we have just finished up single crocheting across the top of our bottom band for the back panel. And from here, our back panel is going to be fairly simple, so I'm actually just going to talk you guys through it. From where we're at, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for the last row for our front panel. So for those of you that have my numbers, I had a total of 58 stitches. So I will now make a chain of 58 and do my first single crochet row. So at the end of that row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 single crochet into every chain. Then we're going to connect it into the base, and then I'll meet you back just so I can show you how we're going to be doing the moss stitches for the back panel. So I've just single crocheted my way all the way down my chain. I've connected it into the base the same way that we normally would, and I've already slip stitched into that following stitch just so we can get started on row 2. So for the back panel, the moss stitch rows have the same idea, but they're going to be done a little bit differently. So since we're along the base and working our way out, what we're going to do is now start with a chain, whereas before for the front panel we were automatically inserting into that first stitch with a single crochet. We're going to start with a chain, skip that first stitch, and then single crochet into the following. And for the back panel, we're doing it this way because we have an even amount of chains for our first row. And that forms our first chain space for this row. Then chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next. And we're going to continue this until we reach the end of the row. We're now at the end of our moss stitch row, and since we're along the outer edge and our falling row is another moss stitch row, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, and we're going to start with our second moss stitch row. So skip that first stitch from our previous row, which should be a single crochet, into that following with a single crochet. So this is per usual. Chain 1, skip a stitch, insert, chain 1, skip a stitch, and insert. And continue on with our moss stitch to reach the end of the row. And now, since we're working in towards the base, our last stitch should be a single crochet. So I've made my way all the way down with my second moss stitch row, and now we're right next to the base. So like I said, the last stitch should be a single crochet. We don't have any more stitches left for this row, so now we're just going to connect it into the base. So slip stitch it into that next available stitch into the base to close off this row. And then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and now we're going to get started on the following row in our row sequence, which now is a single crochet row. And from here we're going to continue on to repeat our single crochet and 2 moss stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, making our way all the way down until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so I am back and I am all finished with the width of my back panel. Now, I did do a chain up of 1 and cut right after my last row, and now we're going to single crochet across the top of our back panel, just like how we did for our front panel, and then we're going to seam the shoulders together. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of the back panel. We are going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and we're now going to put 1 single crochet into every side row. So inserting into that first side row, insert your hook, and single crochet. Let's do that again. Into our following side row, insert into that top loop with 1 single crochet. And continue this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I am back, and I have just finished up single crocheting across the top of my back panel, and now we're going to seam the shoulders together. So all we're going to do is place the front panel on top of our back panel, insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both panels, and then we're going to single crochet both of our panels together all the way across until we don't have any more stitches left to work into within the front panel. So let's all start by inserting our yarn onto our hook, pull through everything, and then we're going to do a chain up of 1. And now from here we're going to find that next available stitch into the front panel, insert your hook, next stitch into the back panel, insert your hook, and single crochet. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single. And that's pretty much it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So we are back, and we have just finished up seaming our shoulders, and now we're going to seam our sides. So first things first, we're going to need to insert our stitch marker into an even numbered stitch from the top about 1 inch underneath our underarm. For me, I've inserted my stitch marker into the 32nd stitch from the top, and that's just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to be inserting our hook into the bottom corner stitch of our front and back panel. And we're now going to do a single crochet seam, so the same seam that we did for the shoulders. We're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now just to do the first one, we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that first stitch into the front panel, into that first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet everything together. And since we already know how to do this, that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we reach our stitch marker. When we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So we are back. Everything is all seamed up and ready to get started on our sleeve. So first things first, let's make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning all of our seams that we have are along the inside. Next, we're going to insert our hook into any stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam. And now we're going to get started with an increase single crochet row. This is my first stitch right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through there with 1, and then into that same stitch with 2 single crochets. This is my following stitch, which is my chain space. Here's my first and my second stitch, and that's it. We're just going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around. And our following 2 rows are going to be moss stitch rows to match the body. So my first single crochet row is all finished. Now a really quick tip is if yours is more ruffled than mine, then that is completely fine as well. But now we're going to get started on our row number 2, which is our moss stitch row. So after we slip stitch into that chain space, we're all going to chain 2 and flip our work. Now from that chain 2, that first chain counts as our turning chain, that second chain counts as our chain, and we are going to skip that first stitch. And we do want to keep in mind that that stitch that we have that's right next to the chain may look like a stitch, but that's actually just the slip stitch that we made when we connected our row. So making sure that we're taking a look at the last stitch from our previous rows, first stitch, we're going to skip that first stitch, and then into the next, insert with a single crochet, forming our first chain space. Let's do this again. Chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet, and again, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet. Continue this, making our way all the way around, and the last stitch that we should all have should be a single crochet because we should all have an even number of stitches. So we've made our way all the way around with our second row, which should be a moss stitch row, and our row 3 is going to be another moss stitch row. So we're going to slip stitch into that chain space, and to get started on any moss stitch row, we're going to chain 2 and flip our work and make sure that we are flipping our work. Once when our work is flipped, we're going to skip that first stitch, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, into that following stitch, which should be a chain space, insert with a single, chain 1, skip a stitch, and single, and continue this to reach the end of the row. And now from here, we're just going to continue to do our increases, and I'm going to be increasing into every other single crochet row until I get the sleeve length that I want. So as an example for our sleeve, I did a total of 18 rows, and like I said, I did do an increase single crochet row into every other single crochet row that we had. So just as an example, this is my first single crochet row right here. This is my second single crochet row, I did not do an increase, and then for my third single crochet row, I did do an increase. And I just continued on with that stitch pattern until I had the length of the sleeve that I wanted. Once when I had that, I did do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Alright, so I am back. Both of my sleeves are finished and I am all done. The last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all on the next one. Bye!